Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful in oil country and around the world. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal. I'm here tonight with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce. How you doing?
Hey David, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm not. I don't know. I'm a little bit ticked off.
Yep.
Uh, just reminds me of just how little we've got going on in the world right now with the lockdown. The lockdown's been extended in Alberta, and the case counts are going up. It's just kicking me off. Vaccines are slowly, finally picking up here, but this has just gone on forever, and yeah, kind of
Been
bums me
over,
out, the whole thing.
been over a year now.
Yeah,
It's been
gray
over a
day
year
here,
now, and it's
miserable
still
day.
we've had two St. Patty's days under COVID. We've had two vernal equinoxes. We're starting to get around to the second time through of things not going on the way they ordinarily might.
So the Oilers game, Bruce, we're going to do the podcast anyway. We're going to
Hmm.
talk about the Oilers game being postponed. We'll talk about a little bit about the Flames loss. We'll talk about, then we'll dig a little bit into Tyson Barrie. Um, it's been a big issue, for, about his contract coming up. And I don't think actually anything's going to happen to the end of the season on his contract. I don't think there is anything imminent perking along. Nonetheless, it has become a bit of a hot point issue whether they're going to sign him or not. And there's a few things that are worth watching as the year goes on in terms of Barrie and his play, I think, that we'll dig into. So Bruce, what do you think about the game being postponed? How are you? How did you react?
I had like it's kind of hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach, to be honest with you. That just, there was nothing where the hockey game was supposed to be, and it was like, it's just sort of a multiple dose of bad news coming very, very late. Like the
Yeah.
players would have been dressed and getting ready for warm up at least from the sounds of it, and they had so that short notice, and I guess a couple of Montreal players tested had anomalous test results, and
Early in
they
the
had
day. Yeah.
yeah, and they couldn't do all the contact tracing or whatever they needed to do, and so they thought before playing the game. I mean, if the Montreal team has been exposed to it, the last thing we want them to be doing is playing our Oilers, right? So,
It was uh, Yoel Armia and Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So
mm,
I don't know if they're roommates or not. And of course, we're hoping that everything's fine with these players. And usually with young people, there's exceptions to the general rule, but with young, healthy people, there's usually not much of an issue with COVID. But there's always exceptions to that. And I agree, Bruce. Like, glad that the glad that there's no outbreak on the Oilers, and they had to postpone the game. That's obviously the wise thing to do. It's a close contact sport. It was when Alberta was having games in hockey. It was mainly spreading on team buses. I don't know if there
hmm
was any proven spread during games or not, but I think in the United States they found in some basketball games that there had been spread during games, if I'm not mistaken. So the latest is coming out of Montreal from hockey writer Eric Engels is the Canadiens say they've decided to close their practice facility tomorrow. No media availability. Players and staff will report to the facility in the morning for COVID testing as usual. So, and John Shannon tweets out the question of whether or not Oilers versus Canadiens on Wednesday is a go won't be decided until Tuesday afternoon. Canadiens team requires full PCR testing in the morning.
hmm
So there was initial talk that maybe they would postpone tonight's game to Tuesday night.
right,
I'm not hearing much talk about that now. Pierre
right.
LeBrun mentioned that. That doesn't sound like it's a possibility now, but we'll see if they play Wednesday or not. What hasn't been answered is like I'm guessing the Oilers were going to practice tomorrow somewhere. I don't know, like, are they going to be able to get ice elsewhere, or do they have to just sit around too and because of this or not? So we don't know that.
Isolated in their hotel rooms. A couple extra
Uh,
days off in Montreal just when you can't use them at all. How's that?
that's right.
That's
Can they
brutal.
not even go for walks? Is that the protocol?
I I haven't read
I
the
no, neither have
thoroughness of the protocol to
I. Yeah, I
fully take it in. I do know that they're making, they're living life conservatively to try and stay as far away from the virus as they can. And I do believe that most of the players are respecting that because, but it's everywhere in society, and unless you're in a true bubble like they were last year, I'm just really kind of amazed that it took this long for one to be in Canada. 37 games have been canceled or postponed in the United States. This is the very first one in Canada, so it's
yeah,
not a
they
welcome thing, and that involves the Oilers makes it that much
they
more bitter. Although it doesn't, luckily, it's not the Oilers team. Like that would be the worst case, obviously, for us as Oilers fans.
as we all know, there's been way more cases, higher rate of case counts and percentage of the population getting sick in the United States than in Canada. Canada took lockdown much more aggressively and seriously than the Americans did. That said, Bruce, the NBA teams, 3 NBA teams have now been vaccinated. I think it's a matter of time before the NHL teams, they're starting to vaccinate everyone down there, right? Biden wants to have, everyone vaccinated, I think, by the end of, is it the end of April and
Like
May 1st. And they're really moving fast down there. So what we're going to have a situation is all the American teams are going to be vaccinated and none of the Canadian teams are most likely. We'll see if maybe but sometime in May or June. Like most Canadians are supposed to be getting vaccinated by June. So you'd think the players, it's the government that does the vaccination here. It's not, private corporations aren't going to get special vaccinations for their employees.
right.
I don't think they can. So I think that the players will be kind of low down on the list. So they'll be waiting till June. And it's interesting, what this could mean, the difference for Canadian and American teams in terms of when they're vaccinated or not, if it's going to have any impact on the playoffs. But fingers crossed, the vaccinations are coming much faster in Canada than they used to, and maybe we'll start clipping along at a good rate here.
I guess hockey isn't quite the definition of frontline workers.
No,
I mean,
it's
there would
not.
be some of the same risks. I mean, that's why I bring it up. Is I'm only being
Yeah,
semi facetious, but there would be some of the risks of person to person
yeah,
contact that
because
comes to the
yeah,
territory doing their
yeah.
job.
Super spreaders,
Right.
like they're out and about, they're moving around, they're interacting with other people, so you can maybe there's
Ideally,
some,
not
but
super spreads. Yeah.
yeah, they're doing their best not to be super spreaders, but yeah, maybe there's I don't know. Well, it didn't go over. I remember a few years ago with H1N1, if I'm not mistaken, didn't the Flames at least get vaccinated before other people, and that caused a huge stink? Is my
It did.
recollection correct on that?
There's still finger pointing going on at the Flames organization as we speak.
Okay, well
It's
there you
never
go.
been forgotten.
So I don't imagine this would be any go over any better if NHL players get vaccinated ahead of other 20 and 30-year-olds in Canada. Although they're, as you say, they could be in a situation where they're more likely to spread than others. So it could be an argument of some sort. Bruce, there's been other Oilers postponements of games in the past, and I remember one where the lights went out in Boston.
Hmm.
But which ones were you thinking of?
Yeah. Well, I can only remember two, and I've been racking my brains thinking, well, there must have been one where, they had a snowstorm or something and they had to play the game the next night or something. But I can only think of two, and they're both kind of epic. So they're interesting stories. The first one was in 1974-75 when the Oilers were in the WHA, and they had that was first year of the Coliseum. So they had the first year of the Canadian Finals rodeo. And for whatever reason that year they had it in March. It subsequently became a November staple in this community for a long, long, long time, the Canadian Finals Rodeo. But this one was in March. And the Oilers, WHA was insane. I was looking at the schedule. Uh, the Oilers went on a 12 road game and 13 game schedule, 5 game road trip to Michigan, Chicago, Cleveland, New England, Winnipeg, one home game against Quebec, and a 7 game road trip to Indianapolis, Cleveland, Minnesota, New England, Quebec, Michigan, and Toronto. So no stayovers, none of this 2 or 3 game series like we got used to out here in the West. And they played 18 games in March of 1975, with the last game scheduled on March 30th against the San Diego Mariners. And it was their first home game in basically all month. So some hockey star friends and I decided we would go out to this game, and we got to the game at you know, regular time. We got there and the ice was friggin' black. They had the finals of the Canadian Rodeo. I think that afternoon they'd had the session, and they thought we'll just shovel all the dirt out of here, clean off the ice, and we'll be good to go. And the ice was black. Have you heard this story? It
No,
was just,
they couldn't
uh,
get the dirt off, and it
and so the
was.
Zamboni was going around and around and around and around the ice. And every few minutes, the PA announcer would come on and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, don't be concerned. There will be a game tonight. We just have to get the ice clean, and then the players will warm up, and we're going to play." And around and around and around went the Zamboni, and so around about I think it was 9:30, 2.5 hours after the start time, something in this range anyway. And they finally announced we will be warming up and then having a game, and then the 1,200 people that were still in the building all cheered. And they came out for the pregame warm-up. Jacques Plante leading the charge for the Oilers, and he came out and he faced a bunch of shots in the net right away. And after about 15 shots, he just skated right over to the timekeeper's bench and said, "I'm not playing. This is unsafe. We can't be playing in this stuff. There's a black spot. I can't pick the pucks up. One of those pucks could kill me. I'm not playing." So, here we are at 10 o'clock at night. Some fans have been waiting there all night, and they said, well, and so they announced and said, "We had to cancel the game. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your ticket stubs and come back tomorrow night, or we'll give you a full refund." So we made the mistake of keeping our ticket stubs and coming back tomorrow night when the Oilers were still playing their 18th game in March, and they fell down meekly and mildly 5-2 to San Diego Mariners in one of the worst hockey games I've ever seen. And just brutal payoff for 2 nights of patience. So it was a very memorable one-day postponement, and just the growing pains of our wonderful Coliseum. The first year they made some mistakes, and this was a doozy.
Don't they have to paint the ice, like when they make NHL ice to get that white that night? Don't they
Hmm.
actually paint something or other, either the ice, the first layer of ice, I'm not sure, and then they ice over it to get it so white? Isn't that what it's usually
Yeah,
done?
and for things like the rodeo, I think subsequently they put like a great big huge tarpaulin down, but don't quote me. There changes were made so that when they lifted the dirt out of there in subsequent years, the ice was say, or they took the ice right out. Even I don't know. Maybe there's someone who worked at the Coliseum who can fill us in, but uh, it was a mistake of whether it was dirt right on the ice and they thought they could just wipe it away or what. It failed spectacularly, and we had black ice in Northland's Coliseum.
Was there another one, Bruce, that you remember being postponed?
Well, I do, and this one you remember too. I know it, and so will a lot of people. This was in the 1988 Stanley Cup Finals against Boston Bruins.
Yeah.
Game four at Boston Garden. Oilers were up 3-0 in the series. They had a chance to win the cup. I remember that morning saying, "Geez, I'd really love for us to get a sweep and get this cup again. But man, I'd love to see the Oilers win it at home game. But there's no way they can sweep at home, right? It's impossible. It's either one or the other." And it wound up that they flipped a coin and it landed on its edge because both those things happened. The Oilers swept the series and they swept it at home because the game got canceled in Boston. They played 16 minutes and 37 seconds of the second period. Craig Simpson scored to tie it at 3. Boston had the lead, and it would have been a very different dynamic if Boston had led when the lights went out. But Simpson scored to tie it up, and they showed the replay, and all of a sudden the screen went blank, and it stayed blank. And we wound up getting coverage. Remember the dark lights under the stands, and Harry Neal and so on would be saying, "Well, we don't know if we're going to get a game going tonight. The emergency generator's on, but this ain't hockey light." And they wound up canceling the game and having to come back to Edmonton to play, basically restart it. And so we still had the 3-0 lead in the series, and now we're at home. And because of that, because Edmonton might have won that game in Boston, but because of that, I personally and 17,000 other people got to see Wayne Gretzky's last game as an Edmonton Oiler, where he scored the Stanley Cup winning goal, set up 2 others. The Oilers beat Boston 6-3, and skated away with the Stanley Cup and did the big team picture at center ice. Just a very, very memorable game, and one that became even more memorable weeks later when Gretzky went away. So it was a memorable postponement that had a very happy ending. The other one didn't have a very happy ending at all, but this one had a very happy ending in terms of the season ending on the best possible note. There's a cup. on our ice at home where all of our fans can get to enjoy it. And then they got married, of course. Wayne and Janet got married in July, and then August 9th happened, and everything changed after that.
The lights went out that day too. Uh,
So,
so we'll see, Bruce. We'll see. Maybe this, I don't know, gives the Oilers an extra day of rest right now, and maybe they could use it. Possibly, it sounds most likely like this game, if it's going to be made up, will be made up at the end of the season. I had this sinking feeling like that Connor McDavid won't get 100 points because he'll have to play one fewer game, and he'll be short of 100 points. Would have been nice, but that's a small thing. Bruce, let's move on to Tyson Barrie.
sure.
So I just want to preface this whole conversation with, I don't think anything's going to happen with Tyson Barrie until the end of the season. And by the end of the season, we're going to have much fuller information about Tyson Barrie. We'll know how he played in the rest of the regular season. We'll know how he performed almost certainly in the playoffs, because that's exactly where the Oilers are headed. And we'll also know how all these other defensemen will have played. They'll also have a little bit better idea about Oscar Klefbom, I think, by then, maybe, possibly. When this decision is going to be made sometime in the summer, that's some time from now, and maybe they'll have an idea whether Klefbom's a possibility at all for next year or not. So they're going to have a lot more information.
Yes.
And so all of this talk is premature. Like all of the worry, I guess the worry was that Oilers were going to suddenly sign him up right now to a new deal and move
No
forward.
chance.
Well, probably not. I mean, you never know, but probably. I agree, Bruce. I'm with you. I just think the prudent thing is to wait, and I suspect that's what they're going to do. And that said, there's some fans who are worried about all of the cheap assists, the second assists that Tyson Barrie is getting.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually find that second assists are warranted. Usually there's at least three players who make a significant contribution to a goal. And the second assist can be really, a stretch pass, a crucial play. Sometimes they're not. But that said, when you're giving a player a contract, the NHL tends to pay for points. And players over a full year sometimes do have kind of inflated point totals. And what you really want to do is pay for the real true talent of the player, the true offensive talent of the player, which points doesn't always represent, and the true defensive talent of the player, which is even harder to figure out.
Yep.
So with Tyson Barrie, I was digging into some research today about Jesse Puljujärvi. He's got only 13 points, Puljujärvi, in 33 games. And yet, when you look at our numbers, we look at the major contributions that players make to grade A chances. Puljujärvi's made a good rate of those. He's made a good number of those. In fact, he's fourth on the team per game in making a major contribution, like a shot or a pass, a screen or a battle won that leads directly to a grade A chance. It's a hugely significant thing. He's fourth on the team. McDavid is at 5.6 per game. Draisaitl's at 4.4 per game. Nugent Hopkins is at 3 a game, and Puljujärvi's at 2.3 a game. Tyson Barrie's a top D-man at 1.7 a game, and Darnell Nurse is at 1.2 a game. So when I was doing this, I was looking, okay, how many of Jesse Puljujärvi's contributions turn into points? And it turns out it's a very low rate. Just 17% of his many chances, or many contributions to grade A chances end up as points, 17%. And so the average on the team is 30%. That's the average when you compare contributions to chances and points, 30%. Tyson Barrie and Darnell Nurse, though, and this is the cause, this is something to keep an eye on as this season progresses. It could change. 53% of Tyson Barrie's contributions to chances have ended up with him getting a point. That's really high. But Darnell Nurse is at 61%. That's double the team average. So he's getting, for some reason or another, puck luck or playing with McDavid at even strength. That's probably a lot of it. Playing with Draisaitl, McDavid will have this impact a little bit. But he's getting a lot of points he's making okay offensive contributions, but his points are kind of out of this world based on that. And the same goes with Tyson Barrie. So that's what I've, in digging into this information on Puljujärvi today, that's what I found it. And I just thought, that's
Yeah.
That's interesting, and you don't want to pay if someone's not really creating all these chances and they're getting a ton of points. You don't want to pay for all those points. You should be aware of that.
Yeah, I want to discount to some degree. You pay, anyway, I don't know how, that's certainly one methodology. And I wonder if some of it is we study the goals a little closer than the other scoring chances because of the result. But also, I know that both guys have been involved in uh, a higher share of goals off of grade B looks than you would expect. I mean, Darnell Nurse has scored 3, 4 goals on shots from outside the scoring zone. So maybe he's got a great shot, or maybe he's caught a couple of goalies in a bad way at a bad moment, or what have you. But it's helped to bring up his points total, obviously.
I guess the only other thing I'd say is I'm gonna do something. I'm just in the middle of this. So, because as this conversation heats up, the Oilers really do have a number of decisions to make, Bruce. They've got
Sure.
players they've got to sign: Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto, Alex Chason, Gaetan Haas. They've got decisions to make on Adam Larson and Tyson Barrie, and then they have contracts coming up the year after that. Yes, Puljujärvi's going to need a new contract. Um, Evan Bouchard's going to need a new contract. So there's decisions coming up both this year and next year, and they've got to look at it. So I'm starting to crunch the numbers now. And just one of the other things, as we dig into this, we're going to have to figure out. The Oilers are going to have to figure out, but no, not us. We're just kind of armchairing it. But the Oilers are going to have to take a serious look at: do you have the money for if Tyson Barrie, for instance, wants $5 or $6 million a year? Do you have that money? Right now, Bruce, the cap's not changing as we go forward. And so whose salary slot is he taking? So it
Yeah,
could be Chris Russell's. He's going down $3 million a year, right? And maybe Adam Larson will make a little bit less if they bring him back. But
if they bring him back.
if they bring him back? But so where's that money? It's already, the Oilers are already pressed up against the cap. So
Hmm.
really the salary slots that they have right now, they can't really change that much at all, unless something happens with Oscar Klefbom. Might change things a little, or unless they buy out James Neal, which is going to open up some cap space. But I've heard this
Sure
idea that
would.
the Oilers have a lot more cap space coming, and
Hmm.
honestly, I don't see it. They have a bit more cap space coming, but they also are going to have to sign another goalie next year, right? If they have
Hmm.
Mikko Koskinen, they got to sign either Mike Smith or another goalie. So the salary slots that they have right now, and I think this is actually a kind of a good and helpful way to think about this, is just look at who's getting the money right now and then fill in the name of who should be getting that money next year. So like
Hmm.
Nugent Hopkins, he's getting $6 million a year. If he wants more, then that's taking away from someone else. Can you really afford to give him more than that
Hmm.
even? Like, will that be prudent? And
Yeah.
I'm on the skeptic side with Tyson Barrie, honestly. Like I'm on the side with they have Evan Bouchard coming. I'm
Hmm.
not seeing how the money works
Hmm.
with Tyson Barrie and the Edmonton Oilers going forward. I don't see where the slot is unless it's the slot that he has right now.
Right.
And you don't think Evan Bouchard's going to take that slot. And I think he is. So that's kind of my starting point. That's my bias heading into this is I'm not on sign up team. I'm not on sign Tyson, team Tyson. And I know like some people are pretty adamant that they want to see that happen. There's probably more adamant that they don't want to see it happen, but I don't know how you can make it happen.
Lots of adamancy out there on both sides of any equation these days, it seems like.
Yeah.
My take on Tyson Berry all along has been he's a 1 year rental. He's not a part of a year rental. They're not going to trade him at the deadline. The idea of moving on from at the deadline and somehow recouping assets that they never gave to get the guy in the first place is silly. Can you imagine McDavid and Draisaitl being told, "Oh, you remember that offensive defenseman we got for you? Yeah, we traded him for a second round pick." Uh, that's not going to happen. But they've rented him for the whole season. At the end of that season, both sides can reach a decision about where they want to go next with it. Are they still a match? Obviously, the Oilers have first dibs to talk to Barry. And if they make him a sweet enough offer, he will sign it. Or they'll make him an offer that he can come back to them if he doesn't find better somewhere else. And they can do it on the second day of free agency, like they did uh, with Mike Smith this year, for example, or Alex Chase on last year. Um, or Tyler Ennis, they did the same thing with him. Uh, they've got to, you're exactly right to talk about it in terms of slots on the payroll, and you have layers of players at particular salaries at each position, and all the teams have, they have, obviously they have an 81.5 million. That's all they can spread around there. So you find efficiencies in one spot, so you can overpay in another spot, and you ideally you have a lot more efficiencies than overpays. The teams that win always seem to have that, and they've got some of the slots are going to be more expensive next year. I mean, their goaltending cost them $6 million plus the maximum $500,000 in bonuses this year. 6.5 million. It's like 8% of the cap, and that's for 10% of your game night roster, 17% of your players on the ice at any given moment, and only 8% of your budget. That's some pretty decent management. And Ken Holland, for what he's been getting out of Mike Smith, that's a value contract and a half that he signed. He won't. If he brings back Mike Smith next year, he'll either cost more or he'll bring in somebody else who's going to cost more. But the goaltending budget's going to go up, so you're going to have to find somewhere else where you can make it fit.
Essentially, the slot that Tyson Barrie has this year is between some of the money from the goalie situation that they didn't spend, and it's Oscar Klefbom's LTIR money. That's the slot. So if Klefbom is coming back, that slot's not there really at all. I mean, if you let's say you just bring Larson back at the same money, I guess there's a little bit of money coming from Chris Russell getting a drop in pay. But
that's
Tyler Yamamoto needs a raise. He's going to get a raise. And I just see that money that Russell was getting probably going to Yamamoto, probably being apportioned to a forward instead. And I don't see, and then the other forwards are just, it's going to be the same. Everyone's going to get about the same, including Nugent Hopkins, is my belief.
But if you want to solve the goaltending problem, like they tried to this year when they offered Markstrom money, right? And they wound up basically they used the $5 million they didn't give to Markstrom per year on the second day, but only for 1 year on one year contracts to Barrie and Smith. That's looking pretty darn good. That day two of free agency, they signed the two guys like one right after the other. Remember, they spent the money on Barrie, and then so there's nothing left for goalies, and they brought Smith back on the cheap, really. So it
worked out pretty well.
Worked out pretty well, but it's a 1 year deal. So of course those 1 year value contracts tend to be the short term ones, and the boat anchors tend to be the long term ones. So they hang around. I mean, we're still paying for Benoit Pouliot, right? So
this is the last year of that, Bruce. Thank goodness for that. The last year. Now, if they buy out James Neal, you know, it's looking to me like if Daryl Cates has unlimited money, a buyout probably is going to be the best bet with James Neal for next season. They'll save about 2.7 million for the next two seasons before paying 1.9 million in the following two. But they'll save $2.7 million against the cap in the first two seasons, and they'll be, if Cates does have the money. And I have no idea about that. I know that they're losing just tens and tens of millions of dollars, $50, $60 million this year. Daryl Cates is paying for his Oilers. So I don't know if he's going to want to buy out James Neal, but they might do that, and that will free up some money against the cap. So we'll see if that happens. But as it stands now, again, I'm kind of a skeptic about where they're going to get all this money. And I'm certainly a skeptic that they have lots of money, like a boatload of money to sign some really good players from other teams. They're going to have a hard time keeping this team together if it's successful. Let's hope it is successful and they have that struggle. But that's what I think the struggle is going to be, is keeping the current talent that you have as they succeed, keeping them in Edmonton on salaries that they're willing to accept here. And the way you're going to improve the team is by having players like Philip Broberry and Dylan Holloway, Raphael Lavoie, Ryan McLeod, Tyler Benson, Cooper Marody come up and improve the team that way. It's not going to be signing that Taylor Hall or whoever it is people are dreaming about the Oilers signing. I don't think it's Taylor Hall anymore, but whoever that is, I'm kind of skeptical about that. And even keeping Barrie, the 1-year rental, seems like a stretch, but you never know.
Well, you look at the top teams, and they always seem to have some contributing players, usually near the bottom of the roster, but who are on entry level contracts. And that's actually the aspect of the Oilers that's missing. I mean, Evan Bouchard's on an entry level contract. He's not even playing any games. I mean, you tell me who else is on the payroll right now who's on an entry level contract, Kyle Yamamoto, and that's expiring.
Yeah.
And
so they're going to need
bunch of guys already in their second contract or more.
So they're going to need 2 or 3 next year, right? 2 or 3 entry-level contracts,
Ideally.
I think. Because you want to also have a stream of players that you're breaking in, right? So you're not breaking in 4 or 5 of them all at once, that you're breaking in 2 of them at a time, maybe 3. I think that's what we'll see next year, Bruce. I do think that they will be looking at breaking in. Evan Bouchard will be one of them again on an entry-level contract, but it probably, I'm guessing either Benson or Marody. Now they'll be on cheaper contracts. They won't be on entry-level contracts. And then probably Ryan McLeod
Ryan McLeod, that's the guy I'm liking more and more in what I'm hearing from Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And that's a guy that's got, still on his ELC. And so he would be able to, provide the third year on the ELC is usually a value year. And then the guy has no negotiating power for the 4th year. So depending on if they give him a 1-year extension or a low ball 2-year, however, it still works to the team's advantage on the second contract. So they need to get some of those guys in the system where they're actually contributing to the Oilers at that low rate.
And it could be either Dmitry Samorukov could make the team next year, or Philip Broberry could make the team also. One of those 2 guys are also in the running. Theodore Lundstrom could come back on a 1-year deal. So there's a number of options on lefty. I think they're most likely to lose a lefty to Seattle. I think either Jones or Lagesson is likely to go to Seattle. It would be my bet at this point. So they'll have some, but neither of those guys are making much money. So they'll be. Right. You'll need a cheaper player. Maybe Slater Cuckoo will come back again. He played well, I thought, when he was there. Bruce, there was one other piece of news that we should deal with before signing off for the night. Is the Oilers signed Michael Kesselring. He was 11th in our December rankings for the Cult of Hockey prospects, ranked 11th. Right. But on the right side of the defense, in terms of prospects, there's only one player that we had ahead of him, and that is Evan Bouchard. Just behind Michael Kesselring are Phil Kemp and Philip Berglund, who are 2 pretty good players as well. And not the separation between Kesselring and those other 2 players isn't that great, I don't think. But Kesselring,
no.
There's no way. Yeah, we're just guessing. We watched all the players play though, at least this fall. Like with our own eyes, we reviewed their games, and this is we in a limited number of games where we could get it wrong quite easily. This is what we saw, and Kesselring is now he's 6'5", 215 pounds. He's doubled his scoring pretty much, or even more so, a higher rate of scoring in first to second year at college hockey. Just turned 21. He's a good skater at the college level. I think he's going to have to improve his skating. He's got pretty good skills, good hockey sense. I mean, I just think he's got to get better at every aspect of the game to make it, but he's a very interesting player, and I can't wait to see him in Bakersfield. I haven't yet subscribed to the Bakersfield service for the season, but I think I'm going to as these players arrive from U.S. college and from Europe. When Broberry gets there, and Lavoie and Kesselring and Kemp and those players, I want to see this. I want to watch the Condors then.
Yeah, they're still building the team because they've still got guys coming over. I mean, both Kemp and Lavoie are still playing. They're in something called the Play Out series in the Swedish Hockey Allsvenskan, where the 2 bottom teams in the second division Allsvenskan uh, play a series with the loser getting relegated. So it's just to keep in the division, and the loser gets relegated down to the third division hockey apple, I think it's called. And so big games. And Lavoie went and got himself suspended. Missed the first two games of the series, which they lost both games. Basby, his team, and Kemp's team. And he came back and he played in games 3 and games 4, both of which Basby won. Today they won in double overtime to stay alive, 3-2 in double overtime. I think I saw films, and I think Lavoie had an assist on the tying goal, and nothing to do with the winner. But I also saw a bit that he was back in the Huskow for some kind of cheap shot during the game again, which if he just got suspended, I mean, that's not good. So
So
I
it's
mean,
it's
you gotta be disciplined in that scenario. You gotta be. These
so
are
it's
huge
the
games for these are money games to the
sure
owners.
for Vasby. Yes, that's right. They
Hmm.
got a which division you're in. So it's kind of like the Flames against the Senators kind of game. The crappy teams. Speaking of which, Senators beat the Flames tonight, and
In
not only
regulation.
in regulation. Thank goodness, no loser point. I hear that Montreal might be, even though the game was postponed tonight, Montreal may be awarded a loser point or a Bettman point by the NHL. Anyway, at the end of the game,
True.
Bruce, at the end of the game tonight, the Ottawa goalie wins his first game, Gustafsson from Sweden. He wins
Hmm.
his first NHL game, and Brady Tkachuk goes to collect the puck. But Rasmus Anderson of the Flames has grabbed it and is skating off the ice with it when he's confronted. I think this is I could be having some details wrong, but this is what I'm getting so far. Brady Tkachuk confronts it, and then Rasmus Anderson grudgingly gives it up, and then Matthew Tkachuk apparently shoots the puck away, I think. So it's some poor sportsman scenario there with the Flames tonight,
Rasmus
which
Anderson and Matthew Tkachuk were poor sports. Say it ain't so, Joe.
yeah, the Black Sox, the Calgary Flickers are the Black Sox of the NHL right now.
Wowza. I mean, Kachuk, he's still getting over that guy who lobbed the puck at him at the end of one game in Toronto there. He hasn't been the same since that happened. Who was it for
It
the
was their good.
Leafs?
It was what's his noodle,
Was it
Muzzin.
Muzzin?
Yeah,
Was it
Muzzin.
Muzzin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was brilliant. That was
Well,
one
he
of the
certainly seemed to distract the grand distractor.
yes. It's always nice. That's why it's always if it was anyone else, you'd think, why are you doing that? But when you do that to the guy who has it coming more than any NHL player that I know of, there's poetic justice to that.
It's not
So
like he rifled the puck at his head or anything. He just lobbed it at him, and Kachuk had it coming because he was doing what he does. So anyway, it's give and take. Sometimes you got to take, and sometimes you just got to deal with it and move on. And I don't know what's happened down there in Calgary, but I do know they've lost 4 out of 6 to Ottawa now. They played
well,
5 times in 11 days, and Ottawa won the first, third, and fifth games,
that's
and
for
now
all the
this
people.
one.
Yeah, that's for all the people who say, well, the Oilers have only beaten the Senators. Well,
Yeah.
when the Oilers were a bad team, they didn't beat teams like the Senators, and was it ever painful? So, that whole critique is just like out of this world crazy. Like, thank goodness we're beating the Senators. Like you got to beat those bad teams. And if you don't, you really pay the price. The coach of the Flames, Sutter, was saying that the reason they're not winning is lack of grade A chances, lack of the best chances, scoring chances from the top two lines, is how he framed it tonight. So I would, from watching the Flames myself, what I've noticed is they seem to be a little leaky on defense, but maybe they have trouble scoring as well. Anyway, I don't want to gloat too much because it's not over yet, and stranger things have happened that a team can suddenly get it together and go on a winning streak. But look
I
out, the
watched.
more
I watched the third period. Ottawa was up 1-0, and somehow Goudreau got behind everybody, and Milan Lucic of all people hit him with a perfect feed breakaway, right on the blue line, perfectly onside. Goudreau went and tied it up. How do you give up a breakaway with a 1-0 lead and 5 minutes left? I'm going, oh no, they got at least a point now, and they'll probably get a sleaze one out in the shootout or something. And Ottawa, our $6 million man Markstrom coughs up a $6 million rebound right into the slot, and Chris Tierney buries it with 2.5 minutes to go, and that was the game winner. And I mean, You'll see the replay later, David. You can tell me if you think it was a bad rebound, but I thought it was.
If it's an outside shot, that he should have handled, then yeah, that's what we consider to be a bad rebound. If, unscreened outside shot, was it that?
It, he should have done better with it. He either should have eaten it up or at least spit it off to the side somewhere rather than right out into the slot. Okay.
Well, we'll see how that contract works out for Calgary. I mean, earlier in the year, they were gloating in Calgary, right, with Markstrom because he was stealing them games. And since then, the gloating has stopped. But I don't.
Oh, it's just moved to Edmonton.
It's just moved. Yeah, it's shifted cities. And I've been as guilty of it as anyone. But it's early days on this contract, and we'll see how it goes. I'm probably overly skeptical. This is another reason I'm not bullish on the whole Tyson Barrie thing. I'm always really skeptical of big contracts for players heading into their 30s. It's just kind of a allergic reaction that I have to them. And I've been wrong on it before. I was like, when they traded Ryan Smith, I was thinking, well, he's getting older, and it's, moving on. It's probably not a bad idea. That it turns out in that contract, I was wrong. I think he gave value for that contract, but just generally speaking, I'm so skeptical of investing your money there. It's generally speaking not a thing that really good teams do, and so we'll see what happens with the Flames on that.
Yeah, well, Tyson Barrie himself said in a post-game interview the night he had 4 assists against the Flames. And they asked him after the game about contract, and he said, we haven't even begun to talk about it. The business at hand is get to the playoffs, and then we got plenty of time to worry about that after. And I thought that's a perfect idea, both for you and the team. There's no rush on either side. They've just passed the deadline where they can start to negotiate on an extension. But there's no reason to rush. I mean, they're going to have dibs on this guy for like what, a month, 2 months after the season is over. Certainly after the regular season's over, and they'll have their time to discuss whether it's still a good fit and whether they can afford his price. And if not, then they move on to other options, and they have other options, so they can't afford to be going too high on Tyson Barrie.
The fact that he said that, Bruce, and if he means it, makes me really like him. Like, I just think that's fantastic if that's his attitude and that's the way they're conducting business. And I just think both sides will know a lot more then about his real value to the Oilers, and you go from there. And
he was very matter of fact about it, and what he said made perfect sense. And it wasn't like he was angling or doing any kind of negotiating in the media or anything. He said, "No, we're not there yet, and we don't need to be."
Well, he comes from, I believe, a business family, right? His father's quite well off, and
Len Barrie.
Yeah, he's a
NHLer,
multi-millionaire.
Used to own the Lightning. Yeah, he's quite a piece of work, Len Barrie.
Probably has a fairly good understanding of business, and I don't know anything about Len Barrie other than he was a part owner of the Lightning. But anyway, good for Tyson Barrie. I'm glad he said that. That is the correct attitude, and we'll see what happens with the NHL market. I don't think it's going to be particularly good market for players this summer, and Barrie will probably be in a very similar position that he found himself in this year, even with a better season point total wise than he had last season. And he is playing well. Like, I love it when he's got the puck on his stick. He really is a fine offensive defenseman. There's just no doubt about it.
And that 5-man unit, I mean, we can talk all we want about our stats, but the 5-man unit works in concert. And it's not necessarily the guys at the back end that are making the plays that are, into the slot and into the net, but they're part of the cycle and the control of the flow of play that leads to those opportunities. So there's maybe in a way that we still can't count the true proper contribution, but I do know that 5-man unit as a group of 5 is very impressive, and that's either with Nuge or Draisaitl, and McDavid, Puljujarvi, Barrie, and Nurse, and when any of those 5 are on the ice at the same time, the Oilers get the puck, they're generally going to hang on to the puck for a while and do something with it.
Do they ever? I really love that 5-man unit. My only thought is, I just have a feeling Evan Bouchard could fit into that 5-man unit pretty well too. one day. Maybe not this year. It's not going to happen, obviously. They
Hmm.
might have to send Bouchard down, quite honestly. Like, he's got to play, doesn't he? I mean, I guess they're worried about injury, but they have Lindstrom here, and he's got to, I don't think sitting around for the whole second half of the season here, Bruce, is that going to work? Like, should they send him down at this point? Then they have to worry about COVID protocols, but maybe they got to just do it.
Well, you just win the next 10 games in a row to get into, a nice big lead in first place, and then you can start experimenting with your roster down the stretch. That's the plan.
Uh, do they do that? I don't think teams do that. This isn't like Major League Baseball. Yeah, I don't
Pie in
think.
the sky. Well, we're not playing hockey tonight, and we're living in bizarro world. We might as well have some bizarre ideas.
Alrighty, well, let's leave it there, Bruce, and hopefully we'll get some good news tomorrow, and they'll be playing Wednesday night at least. Still have a faint hope maybe that they've even play tomorrow, but I don't think that's going to happen. So,
Yeah,
thanks
it's
for
very
talking.
unsettling.
Thanks for talking tonight, Bruce.
Oh, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.